What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Riftbound video. And if you're watching this the day it drops, happy Riftbound Eve in America. It is October 30th. The cards drop tomorrow on Halloween, and it's a really exciting time for all of us involved in this scene. I wanted to give you guys one large video on how to make a deck for every single legend in Riftbound right before the cards drop, just as kind of a celebration and just to give both advanced players and new players just sort of an insight to how every legend in Riftbound works and how we can build decks around them. Even I myself have got over 100 hours on Tabletop Simulator as well as just chatting with friends on Discord, and I still, am not super sure about some of these decks and these legends. So I decided to make this guide to go ahead and be a great little tidbit as a whole lesson guide on Riftbound. Not sure if that's worth. But I'm going to timestamp everything in the description. But this is a great video just while you're driving. If you're looking for individual legends, I'll have it all timestamped below. But this will be a great comprehensive guide where we go over every legend and the kind of decks you can expect to face off when playing against this. So without further ado, let's get into it. So just like I said, we're going to do a legend overview, we'll do a general strategy, look at all the critical cards, and then I'll show you guys a sample deck list from either myself or online that I've seen floating around. And we'll be going in alphabetical order, which means we will start with Ahri. So Ahri is a battlefield control legend whose legend ability is when an enemy unit attacks a battlefield you control, give it one might, minus one might this turn to a minimum of one might. Sorry, my face cam's kind of covering this up, but I will be reading out every ability, and obviously all the decks will be linked in the description so you guys can see that yourself. But the idea with Ahri is that we want to get a hold of battlefields and force our opponent to attack into us due to that minus might legend ability. We're going to use our mind rune types, which are very strong and have cheap single target buff cells to maintain hold of our battlefields. These are cards like Discipline, On Guard, and then we're going to use a lot of our strong early game units to grab early points, along with our situationally strong champion cards, which can really accelerate how many points we score really fast if we have a solid hold on the battlefield. This is another deck that has, I think, a very high, a high floor. Sorry, I mistyped that, meaning that you can bring this into a local, do pretty well with it, especially if you're new at Riftbound, just because it's a fairly simple legend ability, some fairly simple cards, but it has a really, really high ceiling. I've seen some of the best players in the game, like Prismat, play an Ahri control deck with Time Warp that really did some impressive stuff and was tough to beat. So, really interesting deck that I think is, maybe not in the best spot right now with this first set, but I bet with the second set is going to be really, really strong. So some key cards in this deck, as I mentioned, we've got Discipline and Unguard being your single target buff spells, Defy being one of the best counter spells in the game. We have Stupefy, which is your card draw engine, as well as utilized for helping get those battlefield wins. Zonia's Hourglass to keep your units alive, and then you have the staple blue cards of Thousand-Tailed Watcher and Ravenbloom Student. Tasty Fey Folk is a really great engine regenerator. When she dies, the ability to channel 2 runes exhausted and draw a card. And then lastly, the two Ahri champion abilities or Ahri champions that you can sub in and out of your champion spot depending on what kind of deck you're running or what kind of deck you're facing. So this is a deck list I found online. I don't have too much experience playing Ahri, but it just is kind of doing the things that we said, which is trying to maintain holds of battlefields, trying to survive any removal, especially from decks like Kaisa, where you can buff up your cards, and then lastly, saving up for potentially that time warp in a control versus control matchup. Next, we've got Annie. So the idea with Annie is that we're going to play really aggressive and then work on retaking battlefields. So Annie has access to some really strong early game as well as the really, really strong spell removal that comes with the Fury rune types. The idea with her is that you want to retake against larger units with the accelerated units and then constantly have answers to our opponent's play due to our legend ability, which says at the end of our turn, ready 2 runes. So we're always going to have a rune pool ready to respond to what they're doing on their turn, which is really nice. It's a nice fun combination of as well of controlling unit movement and unit removal. So sometimes you're just going to remove the unit straight up with something like a void missile or a hex tech ray, and other times you're going to use like a gust or a fight of flight just to control the battlefield and have a lot of answers. So some of the key cards in these deck, Falling Stars, and pretty much every single Fury type deck, especially if it's control. We've got the Annie champion unit. Ride the Wind and Cleave are going to be great for both keeping our opponent off the battlefield and then retaking it with Cleave. Void Seeker, another really, really strong removal spell, Fight or Flight, and then Vayne Hunter, who really plays perfectly into this deck's idea of retaking battlefields. So here's a sample deck list online. This is from Sold Out, who's a really, really good player. I've played against him at least once, and he always consistently does really well in these tournaments online. So you can copy this deck list knowing that you can perform really, really well with it once you have some practice. Next, we'll get into Darius. Darius can play very aggro as well as some mid-rangey, but I think my favorite way to play Darius is actually with Hook Darius, which is utilizing the card Baited Hook, which is in the next page. I actually will be having a deck guide going up soon on Hook Darius. I think it's a really interesting deck that has some pretty good matchups into some of the best decks in the game, like Master Yi and Kaisa. But the idea behind Darius is he's got really strong early game units and cheap removal to take an early control of the game, and then you can retake the battlefield with some of the stronger removal as well as the accelerated champion unit. So his legend ability is a little more complicated, so I'll explain it for you here. It is a reaction, so you can do it at any time, and it is a legion ability, which means you have to perform an action before you do that. So it's Legion, add 1 rune. So basically, you can tap him for 1 more rune. So the reading says, abilities that add resources can't be reacted to get the effect if you've played a card this turn. So what that means is you have an extra rune with your legend that you can tap. But in order for it to be an extra rune, you have to do something else that turn. So let's say I've got 2 runes and the Darius. So I tap the 2 runes and I play a Ravenbloom student, for example. Then I see the opponent has a unit on the battlefield. I can then tap Darius, and I still have to pay the power cost. So Hextech Ray, in this case, I'll flash it up on screen, is a 1 power, 1 Fury recycle cost. I can tap Darius to pay for that rune cost to spend that spell. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, just let me know in the comments, and I'll do a better job explaining that. Sorry if that was a little rough. But we can utilize this Legion ability as extra runes basically for free. So it's really, really great. And we can kind of hide some of the cards we might have in our hand because by using this guy, we're not tapping out our entire rune pool and it can kind of throw off our opponent. So, some of the key cards in Darius decks, Falling Star, like I mentioned, Seal of Unity is really, really strong when paired with a card like Vanguard Captain. Baited Hook right here. Again, I won't go into too much detail. Baited Hook is essentially a 3-cost gear card that for one cost of rune and 1 recycle of the order type, you tap Baited Hook, destroy one of your units of X might, and then you get to summon a unit. You reveal the top 5 cards of your deck and summon a unit with X plus 1 or less might. So if you destroy a 2-unit Vayne, for example, you can then summon Darius from the top of your deck for free without paying any of its costs. So that can be really strong and a really fun deck to play. The Darius Trifarian Champion unit, really, really strong. When you play him as your second card in a turn, he gets plus 2 might and he's accelerated. So that's a 7 might swing. So what you can do, play Darius, 5, pay the 1, play Cleave. He gets plus 3 attack, plus 2 more, 10 might accelerated unit. Really, really hard to stop that when it's coming at you. But really, really fun deck to play. Really fun champ to play. Kind of hard. He is difficult. There's a lot of things you have to keep track of, but really, really strong deck, and definitely going to be seeing this at some of your locals, just like you do in top lane. So here is a deck list from the best Darius player I've seen. His name is Batsu. He did really, really well in some of these early tournaments, and I copied his deck list and did pretty solid as well at some of these midweek tournaments that are low stakes. But this is a really tested, well-tested, tried and true deck list. You might want to check, if there's a more updated one online, but I found success using this deck, and it's the Hook Darius version that I mentioned before. Next, we have Jinx. So Jinx's legend ability reads, at the start of your beginning phase, draw 1 extra card if you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand. So normally we start our turn, we untap our runes, we draw a card. If you're Jinx and you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand, you get to draw 2 cards. So what do we think this is going to play into? That's right, a discard card and combo type deck. So Jinx, there's a lot of cards in the Jinx decks that utilize cards that require discard to gain advantages and activate abilities. Then we can nullify this card discard with our legend ability, as well as access to a lot of gear cards that enable us to draw cards. And then we can use combo cards together, like Super Mega Death Rocket and Immortal Phoenix, to create large tempo swings. So if we go to these key cards and look at Super Mega Death Rocket and Immortal Phoenix, Super Mega Death Rocket reads, deal 5 to a unit. When you conquer, you may discard 1 card to return this from your trash to your hand. While Immortal Phoenix reads, when you kill a unit with a spell, you may pay 1 rune and 1 fury recycle cost to play me from your trash. So if you're following, that means we pay for Super Mega Death Rocket, our opponent's unit, kill him, toss Mega Death Rocket. Then we discard Immortal Phoenix from our hand to our graveyard, get Super Mega Death Rocket back, but because we killed a spell with it, we get to play him from our trash. Pretty good to me. Other things we have, or I believe technically Immortal Phoenix has to be in your graveyard first, but oftentimes with these Jinx decks, you're trying to play Chemtech Enforcer first, so you can discard the Immortal Phoenix from your hand, get it right back with Super Mega Death Rocket. I'm not too sure, I haven't played too much Jinx, but as you can see, there's a lot of real potential here with some of these cards to do some fun things here. And I think Jinx is another champ who's in a solid spot right now, but I think, next set, when we start seeing the new cards, has potential to get really strong due to some insane cards like Super Mega Death Rocket, stacked decks, etc. So here's a little deck list I found. This is from Kublazift. Again, I don't have that much experience playing Jinx, but there are times where I've played against Jinxes, and sometimes you just have to sit there and watch them unload their hand at you like it's a Yu-Gi-Oh match. So I could see this being potential to be a really fun deck, especially at locals. Next, the deck everyone knows, right? Kai'Sa. This is our tried and true control deck. So Kai'Sa's... Oh, actually, my mistake. This is the Kai'Sa champion unit. We meant to do the Kai'Sa legend cards. So let me pull that up for you guys real quick. Sorry, there's a lot of... This presentation took a long time, so I knew I was going to make some mistakes in here somewhere. Let me get that for you guys. Let's get Kai'Sa up. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So Kai'Sa's legend ability reads, tap her at a reaction speed to add a rune cost of any type. Use only to play spells. So essentially, what that means is, if we go back and we have, this is a bad example because we can't use Super Mega Death Rocket. Hextech Ray, for example. Hextech Ray is tap 1 rune and then recycle 1 Fury type rune to pay this card. Well, with the Kai'Sa Legend ability, we do not have to recycle that Chaos or that Fury rune type. We simply tap our Legend ability to pay for that. So it's essentially a way of reducing our recycle costs for all these spells that we're playing, which is obviously really, really strong when you're playing a controlled deck with lots of spells that are removal for removal purposes. So this is the best deck in the game. I would say it's really hard to argue that right now. And the way we want to play this deck is to utilize our strong removal to clear battlefields, get tempo swings, surprise our opponents with some strong accelerated units like this Kai'Sa champion unit here or Darius. If our opponent has cards with deflect or lots of that would demand high value of trade, we can build up our own units to swing in a single turn and retake the battlefields. And then once holding the battlefields, we just have so many tools to stop our opponents from retaking. So this is a really strong deck, been really strong for a long time. And right now, this is probably going to be what most people are bringing to the major and serious tournaments. So some of the key cards, again, we have Falling Star, Void Seeker, Hextech Ray being our removal, Smokescreen for when we run up against large units in Dazzling Aurora decks. We have the Kai'Sa Survivor and the Darius Triferian cards to swing with acceleration, and comboed with Cleave can be really, really strong. Noxus Hopeful being a really good Legion card since we're playing so much removal anyway. Really easy to just get a 4 might and remove a 3 health unit from the game for 3 mana. And then Time Warp is now also making its way into Kai'Sa decks due to so many Kai'Sa decks being played, that Time Warp being really good in the mirror matchup if you can set that up. So this is, sorry, my face covering this a little bit. Let me back out. This is the current Kaisa deck that I believe was maybe won the last major tournament. I forget. It's probably the number one Kaisa deck on Piltover Archive, but very good deck. They're all played pretty similar, and the crutch cards are all going to be in there. There's always going to be Falling Stars, always going to be Smoke Screens, Void Seekers, Stupefies, always going to have Dariuses and Kaisas. The Raven Bloom student also really good with this deck. But this is definitely a tough deck to play, but it is really satisfying, and it is probably the strongest deck in the game. So just know you are definitely going to be seeing this deck a lot at any type of tournament. Next, we get to Lee Sin. Lee Sin's ability is for 1 cost, you may tap him to buff a friendly unit. What does buff mean? It means if it doesn't have a buff, it gets a +1 might buff. So with Lee Sin, we want to buff units and then create a mega raid boss with our Lee Sin champion. What we can do is that we can utilize spells that are also discounted by these buffs that I'll show you in just a second, and force opponents to fight us and our super big units by controlling unit movement and spells that force units to fight each other. And then, as I mentioned, we can really build a raid boss Lee Sin, because while most cards can only have 1 buff on them at a time, Lee Sin Ascetic can have any number of buffs, and then on top of that, you can tap him if he's already holding a battlefield, doesn't move or anything, to get another buff and keep building him. So really, really strong, really, really good. Cards like Charm can move our opponent's units into our own battlefield so that we can fight them. Lee Sin Centered and Udyr Wildman take really good advantage of the buffs as well. And then Pit Rookie being our buff engine, Stand United being our buff engine, Zhonya's Hourglass so that we can keep our really strong buffed units alive. All really, really strong cards and a fun deck to play. And I believe it's also one of the starter decks, so you're probably going to be seeing this at your sealed release events coming up this weekend. So here's a deck list that I made. Not too much experience, just mostly fooling around with friends, but this is a fun deck. It's not like super top tier, but I'd say it's like C tier to B tier, but really fun to play, and especially if you're just bringing it to locals, a good time. I really do enjoy kind of making a raid boss Lee Sin, protecting it with Zhonya's Hourglass, stuff like that. So, linked in the description as always. Next up, we have Leona. Leona's legend ability reads that when you stun 1 or more enemy units, you buff a friendly unit. So, what do we think we're going to be doing with this deck? That's right, stunning units. So we're going to utilize our stun units in combination with our legend ability to render our opponent's large units useless and buff your own units. I should specify, if you don't know what stun means, when you stun an enemy unit at a battlefield, which are card abilities, they don't do combat damage this turn. So let's say you have a 4 might Leona and a 4 might enemy you're attacking into. Leona attacks in, stuns the enemy unit. Normally they're both 4 mites, they'd kill each other, right? Well, the other unit is stunned, doesn't deal combat damage, so it dies and Leona lives and conquers the battlefield. Now, it is important to note, so just because you stun an enemy unit doesn't mean that its might goes to 1. It means that it doesn't do any combat damage. So if they have an 8 might unit, you attack in with a 4 might Leona, neither unit's going to die. Because Leona's not going to take combat damage due to the big units being stunned, but because you don't have 8 might to kill him, what would happen is Leona would just go back to base. So you need to keep that in mind. However, when you look at the Leona decks, there's actually a Leona champion ability, or a champion with the ability, if stunned enemy units have -8 might to a minimum of 1. So when comboed here, you can stun with a unit, swing in with her, you stun that enemy unit's might goes all the way down to 1 might, and then you almost certainly kill it on the battlefield, right? So this deck is really, really fun. At first, people were saying it was really weak, but now with the rising popularity of Dazzling Aurora, which we'll talk about later in some decks, this is really the anti-big unit deck right here. So I think this really could be strong, especially right when the cards drop and people are just sort of playing big units and big guys, maybe don't have some of the control cards yet, just due to card availability. I think Leona could actually be really, really strong here, and I've played against some really, really good players on Leona. This deck list, again, my face covering, I'll back out, is made by my friend SKK. I don't think the link is up anymore, but here is the deck list. A lot of Leona deck lists are very, very similar to this, but really, really strong, especially into Dazzling Aurora. So if you're going to a local or a tournament where you think Dazzling Aurora decks are going to be really, really popular, you could probably do super well with this Leona deck. Next, we have Lux. Lux is a deck that has not seen much play in competitive tournaments, but she is fun, and she's a really fun deck, and another control style deck that I think with the coming set, if she can just get a couple of cards, units in particular, that can make their way into this deck, she could be really, really strong next drop in February. So Lux's legend ability reads that when we play a spell that costs 5 or more, draw 1 card. So, what are we going for? Late game control with expensive spells that allow us to ramp into or to draw more cards. So what's nice about Lux, she has access to some of the best removal in the game with the Order rune types and the Mind rune types. We are going to try to control the board and sneak in our early game points while we can. And then once we get to the late game, we have finishers for every card in the game, and then we're going to try to time warp our way to victory. So some of the key cards here, we have our removal, we have our hidden blades, our singularity that I put on twice on accident, falling comet, our units, Ravenbloom Student, and then which is obviously really good with any spell deck, and then the ways we're going to try to steal points with our Sprite Mothers and our Soaring Scouts early. We have stuff like Recruit the Vanguard, which gives us recruit tokens in base, and then our own champion unit where we can tap her to add 2 mana for spells. And then lastly, coming in with the finisher Time Warp, which lets us take 2 turns, and then we can really potentially score 4 points off those 2 turns. So that's why that's so strong. So this is a deck list that Juan made, and I added on the sideboard. So the link will be in the description. He made most of this deck list, but as I said, really, really heavy control deck. We've got double unchecked power, triple time warp, 3 recruit the Vanguard, triple singularity, Imperial Decree, falling comets, etc. So really, really fun deck and really good into late game decks. It's another good Dazzling Aurora counter potentially. Master Yi. So Master Yi, one of probably the second strongest deck in the game, arguably first to be honest, but I would say second strongest deck in the game. Very straightforward legend ability here. While a friendly unit defends alone, it gets +2 might. So for any of you guys new, just so you know, defending only counts once the opponent is trying to conquer your battlefield. So if you have a 3 might unit on a battlefield alone, it does not become 5 might until the opponent attacks into it. So having said that, if you're playing against a Master Yi, let's say we're playing Kaisa, for example, you have that Hextech Ray. The Hextech Ray will kill the 3 might unit on the battlefield while nothing is there, but as soon as you attack into that battlefield and you try to Hextech Ray it gets that +2 might buff. So remember, if you're trying to remove Master Yi's units, you want to do it before you ever attack into the battlefield. So as I said, we're going to use our really strong legend ability to solo hold battlefields. Then we are going to use our really, really strong mind cards, which have single target buffs like Unguard and Discipline. And then we're going to continue to buff our units and try to save their lives to hold onto these battlefields as long as possible. And then we're going to finish out the game with the really, really strong body and body and mind late game units. And then another option for this deck is to play the Dazzling Aurora version. There's really good ramp in the orange rune type, and we can ramp up to our really big dudes really fast if we draw well. So some of the key cards, like I said, we have Unguard, the single target buff, Charm. Remember, we charm a unit into our battlefield, they become the attacker, we immediately get that 2-unit buff. So that's like your bread and butter for Master Yi right there. If we're doing the Dazzling Aurora version, we're definitely going to be running the Catalyst of Aeons as well as a card such as Mobilize on there. Blitzcrank, another really good card with Master Yi, because when you play him to a battlefield, you get to move an enemy unit to that battlefield. So then if you make them attack into you, you don't get that extra buff because you would have been playing Blitzcrank to another unit there. But if Blitzcrank's alone, you do get that 2 might buff. Master Yi Honed is a really, really good way to close out games, as well as an 8 might hold at the end if they have to attack into you. Zhonya's Hourglass is a bread and butter for us because it just keeps our unit alive for call it to base instead of killing it. And then Kiana is really great in those Kai'Sa matchups because she has the deflect ability, which means you need to pay an extra recycle cost to target her for a spell. And then when she conquers, you also draw 1 or channel 1 Rune Exhausted. So that's a really powerful conquer ability. This is my Master Yi deck list that I was playing. This is not the ramp version. This is just what I would call a standard bread and butter Master Yi card. Strong units, strongholds, keep them alive, single target buffs. Relatively straightforward to play, but can be really, really strong and a really good deck. And I think that as this continues to evolve, there's probably other better deck lists out there right now. This is a really good deck you can bring in and play immediately. Next, Misfortune. And the best way to play Misfortune is Dazzling Aurora. So, Misfortune's legend ability is you tap her to give a unit ganking this turn, which simply means the units can move from battlefield to battlefield. Really, really strong when you're using Dazzling Aurora to get super large units out onto the battlefield. We get a big old 8 might unit down there, tap Misfortune, all of a sudden, after he gets his hold point, he can go and conquer the other battlefield. Because what is your opponent going to have that's greater than 8 might? They're not. Really great gear synergy with the Chaos and the Body rune types, and that's going to generate a lot of card draw for us. And then, as I just mentioned, we're going to use the Legend ability to control multiple battlefields. Some of the key cards in here, we've got the gear cards like Treasure Trove, Scrap Heap, and Acceptable Losses, which is how we're going to be drawing lots of cards. We've got our strong ramp cards with Catalyst of Aeons and Mobilize, which I don't have on here. Dazzling Aurora, key card here. For those of you that don't know what Dazzling Aurora is, it is a 9-cost 2-body rune type for recycle, where at the end of our turn, we reveal cards from the top of our deck until it reveals a unit, which we then play for free. So basically, the idea of a Dazzling Aurora deck is we're only playing massive units that have a huge impact when they get onto the battlefield. So we have Deadbloom Predator at 8 might. We don't have to pay for it at all. He's got deflect, so they're already tossing more mana per spell they're targeting him with. And we can play him to an occupied enemy battlefield. So Dazzling Aurora decks are obviously going to be really slow, not playing any units the first couple of turns. We can take away that other hold point the opponent would have if we had to play a unit to our base and then attack next turn. Mind Splitter, we get to literally look at their hand, see everything they have going on, and then toss any card we want from it. Really good. Invert Timelines, each player discards their hand and draws 4. We have a terrible start to the game. No, we don't, and neither do you. You don't have a good start to the game anymore. Toss our hands. So, really, really fun deck. I think that's probably going to be the second or third most popular deck just because of how good Dazzling Aurora can be. And right now, there's not that many options to destroy gear. So, another really fun deck and really strong with the Misfortune's ganking legend ability. This is the deck from Savitz. If you're a Hearthstone fan, that is the Savitz, the GOAT. Pretty standard deck, utilizing it's the gear. It's actually a little different from the deck list of the deck guide I put up last week. This is sort of the more gear heavy version, but as always, you got the big boys that are really strong. You've got the Volibears, the Deadblooms, the Soul Gorger, the Mind Splitters. You've got all the standard ramp cards, all the card draw, and you've got some Tecton removal like Bullet Time. Sett, another very strong deck, probably top 4. If you haven't figured it out, the top 4 decks by now are Kai'Sa, Master Yi, Sett, and then probably just Dazzling Aurora wherever it appears on whichever legend. But Sett's ability, this is a little bit difficult if you are a beginner, but when a buffed unit you control would die, you may pay 1 rune type of any color, that means recycling it, and exhaust me to spend its buff and recall it exhausted instead. When you conquer, ready me. So, what does that mean? Let's say we have a 3 might buffed unit. So it's 2 might plus the 1 might from the buff on field. Our opponent plays a Hextech Ray to deal 3 damage to it. Normally, our unit would die, but we can use Sett basically like a Zhonya's Hourglass. If we recycle one of our rune types of any color, we can recall that unit to base instead of it dying if we tap Sett and pay the 1 rune recycle cost. So, this is obviously ridiculously strong because our opponent has to kill our units twice to kill it, And then a lot of times, even more, because we're just going to rebuff it in base. So this is really, really strong against control decks, especially Kaisa, who have spell removal. So essentially what we want to do with Sett is get really high value trades because they're going to have to send so many resources to kill things that should normally die a lot quicker. And the hard part with this deck, this is one of the hardest decks to play in the game, and there's a really, really good player who I recommend you check out his YouTube. His name is Tog, and he's the one who provided our deck list, who's really good at Sett, and you can see sort of the insane combos and the insane ceiling that this deck has. It's really we really have to know when to use the legend ability, when to know when to let our units die, because the only downside of using that legend ability is we're recycling runes every time, which means we're losing a lot of our rune pool a lot of times. So that can put us in some tricky spots. And then lastly, because it also has access to the order type, we have access to some of the highest single target removal in the game. So then we can take care of some of these large units that decks like Dazzling Aurora are putting out. So Sett's like a really cool deck because it's not like top one or two and just pure power, but it has potential to do really, really well against some of these best decks. Some of the key cards here, we have Sett Brawler, the Showstopper card, Primal Strength to just give us a ridiculous 7 might on turn, Shen, surprise defensive cards. People think they can just come in and take a battlefield. All of a sudden, they're dealing with an extra 5 might and tank. Challenge makes a lot of sense when our units don't die if we don't want them to. Call to Glory, another card that we can spend buff to just play it for free. And then Kinku Monk, Pit Rookie, and Showstopper are just giving our units buffs and refreshing the buffs on there. So really fun, really cool deck to play. Again, this is Tog's deck list that I believe he's been using lately. Yuki is the Sett guy. He's the go-to. I believe he has a YouTube channel. I don't know how much he uploads, but people have done VOD reviews of his games, and he's a really good player. And if you're really trying to get good at Sett, I would recommend, well, one, watch my deck guide, but then as well, watch his games and the VOD reviews that people have of those games, because he plays it probably better than anyone I know. Next up, we have Teemo. Teemo is the Hidden Surprises deck. So what Teemo is you may pay one cost to hide a card with Hidden instead of paying the recycle cost. So we can just tap one rune instead of recycling a rune to pay for the hidden card. And then if you tap one or pay one rune, so tap one rune and tap Teemo, you can put a Teemo unit into your hand from your champion zone or the board. So we basically either recall the Teemo from our board if we know it's going to die, or we put it from the champion zone into uh, put a Teemo unit into your hand from your champion zone on a board. Not too sure why we would ever put it into our hand from the champion zone. Probably so we can play it hidden. That's why. So you would put it from your champion zone to your hand so you can play it hidden, and they might not know which card you're playing hidden because there's so many hidden cards in this deck. So essentially, we want to keep our opponent guessing at all times because we have so many hidden cards that activate really powerful effects when they're flipped over. Mirror Force vibes if you're into Yu-Gi-Oh! We want to force our opponents onto the battlefield with on and off of the battlefield with our chaos spells that allow us to set up on the battlefield, and then we want to close our games out with some of these strong unit finishers. So some of these strong unit finishers include, again, Mind Splitter, Dr. Mundo. We have the really, really strong hidden cards like Teemo. Consult the Past is kind of your bait hidden card. Like they think it's going to be something that deals damage or removes stuff, but it's actually just drawing cards. Guerrilla Warfare to refresh your hidden cards. Convergent Mutations, so that when you flip Teemo, get the +3 might. You can also increase its might to be the might of like another large friendly unit like Dr. Mundo or Mind Splitter. So there's so much in these decks to like keep track of that people are just sort of constantly scared to attack into your battlefields. And then sometimes they're just going to say, like, oh, screw it, I'll go in. And then they lose their unit. They have no idea how you buff that unit up 7 might or how you're defending it this well. Or they can't even reach the battlefield because we're playing stuff like Ride the Wind or Fight or Flight and stuff like that. So, not a deck I have really any experience playing, but the deck list I got from actually won the tournament in Shenyang, and it's a pretty interesting deck, pretty fun deck. And then obviously Teemo is like one of the most popular champions in League of Legends, so I imagine this deck will have like a really high play rate just at like locals and less serious tournaments, just because people like him as an icon so much. On to Viktor, probably my favorite legend in the game. So, Viktor is a token swarm or mid-rangey type of deck with the ability that if we tap one rune and tap Viktor, we get to play a one might rune unit, one might unit recruit token. So, at worst, we're always going to have a turn one play, right? Like sometimes you have those bad draws. Hey, at least you get a one might unit token out there, which sometimes is a lot stronger than you think because 1 point is the difference between winning or losing a game. So if your opponent comes out, plays like a one card on the first turn, second turn you play the one might unit, boom, you trade battlefields and you got a point for free when otherwise you just would have been like, oh, this game is over because I drew all really expensive cards. So the legend ability is also really good just to round out awkward rune pools. You can always, if you've got 4 runes and you have only three cost cards to play, boom, recruit token. Viktor, being in the mind and the order rune type, has access to some of the strongest single target removal spells in the game. And because of our legend ability and the cards available in these archetypes, we have the potential to really spam the board and play super aggressive if we want to as well. So you can play this deck a lot of different ways, and that's why I like it so much. Really, really strong champion unit that when another non-recruitant unit token dies, you get to play a one might recruit in base. So we basically just get infinite units there if our other people are dying. Cards like Siphon Power and Grand Stratagem turn our recruit units into really, really strong high might units that our opponent can't deal with. Again, the single target removal like Hidden Blade, Coal of the Weak, Riptide Rex, and then cards like Machine Evangel can produce us more recruit units, and then we get really high value from stuff like Cruel Patron, who has to kill a unit in order for you to play it. But if you're just killing a one might recruit token, then you're getting a 6 might card for 4. How good is that, right? Um, and so, really, really fun deck to play. It does get a little bit countered by Kaisa because of Akathian Rain, but I really do think this deck has potential, and it's like one of my favorites to play in the game. And he's an Arcane, he's fun in League of Legends. There's just, what's not to like about this deck, right? So this deck list, and I'll pop out because I'm going over it, is my own deck list. And admittedly, this is a hyper-focused deck list. Back when it was the Piltover Archives like Rift Lab Trials Championship sort of tournament, I was expecting a ton of Hook Darius because I was just convinced that everyone was tired of playing Kaisa and Master Yi and was going to be playing Dazzling Aurora and Hook Darius. And I was partially right. Everyone was playing Dazzling Aurora decks, but what I was not right about was no one was playing Baited Hook except for Batsu, Baited Hook except Batsu, and everyone was still playing Kaisa. So the Akathian Rains did screw me over a few times, but running the triple salvage in this deck made me perform really well against the Master Yis I played against because I would either pop their Dazzling Aurora or pop their Zhonya's Hourglass. So fun little niche deck in here. I probably would change it up if I was just expecting more Kaisas, but this was a really fun deck I played, and I don't think I ever made a deck guide on it, but I do have a Viktor deck guide for sort of like the aggro spammy, which was actually the first video I ever put on this channel, so it's probably not that good, but the deck list, I promise you, is solid, and this is a really, really fun deck that I can't wait to be playing of. Next, we have pretty much the opposite of Master Yi, and that is Volibear, who is entirely a ramp deck. So, Volibear's ability is that when you play a mighty unit is any unit with 5 or more might. You may exhaust him to channel 1 rune exhausted. So, if you pay a big guy that doesn't have to recycle any runes, then you get to ramp up another rune. Or if you pay a big guy that normally has a rune recycle cost, you just get to tap him to take back that rune that you just had to recycle. So really leans into playing large units. So essentially what we want to do is ramp up as fast as possible, as high as possible, so we can start playing big guys. Use our strong removal and large units to control the battlefields. We have a lot of spells that we can run that are discounted with the use of high might units. And then once we're at that high rune total, we're going to be playing so many big guys that are too tough to deal with that our opponent's not going to be able to keep up. So some of the key cards here, we can play it as Dazzling Aurora, though it's not actually necessary to always be running 3 of these guys in here. We have cards like Stormbringer, Sky Splitter, which are really strong removal. We have, as I said, sort of cards like Stormclaw Ursine and Brazen Buccaneer, who would trigger that mighty ability of our legend, so we get to ramp up and we don't have to pay any cost for them because there's no recycle power associated with it. And then we have our standard ramp cards like Catalyst of Aeons and Mobilize as well. So fun deck. It's just objectively fun to play big strong guys, right? Like, is it not? I love playing when I'm playing Dazzling Aurora, just tossing down big dude after big dude after big dude and just seeing your opponent go hopeless. This is the deck list by a guy named Jack Hayes on Piltover Archive. I just took it. I say myself because I added a sideboard to it since he didn't have one. But pretty standard ramp deck list, I would say. Fun deck, and I'm excited to get more games in with this guy. All right, coming towards the end, we have Yasuo. So Yasuo is a legend meant to be entirely about unit movement. His legend ability is that if you tap 2 runes and tap him, you may move a friendly unit to or from your base. That doesn't sound that strong, right? Until you see his champion units, which are largely based off of movement. So with Yasuo, you're really kind of playing your own game. You're trying to stop the opponent from scoring too many points early on, and then you're going to score a lot of surprise points with your movement abilities and your legend ability. And then once you get Yasuo out onto the field, we're trying to protect him at all costs, since he is the generator of our third points in turns most of the time. So some of the key cards here, I mean, as you can see, the Yasuo Wind Rider, the third time I move in a turn, you score a point. So ideally, we want to be doing something like we conquer the battlefield with Yasuo. We've got him protected with Zhonya's Hourglass right here. He has ganking, so we can use a card like Ride the Wind to move a unit and ready it, and then we move it again with some other spell like Last Breath. And then boom, we scored 3 points in a turn, which is the only deck in the game that can do that besides like when you run Time Ward, but that's technically 2 turns. So really cool mechanic. I'm not sure how strong it is right now. I've not seen any Yasuos in any of the major tournaments we've been playing. But again, you know, who knows what's coming next set. And Yasuo, he's like, what's not to like, right? Like Ghost of Yotei just came out. This dude's a samurai. He's been epic for years in League of Legends. So play it, have fun, do your own thing. Here's the deck list I found. This is made by a guy named Pierre. Again, I really don't have any experience playing this deck list, but it is pretty cool to see this stuff get pulled off when it actually does work. So let me know if you guys have fun playing the Yasuo decks at all. I'm really curious, and I can't wait to check him out in a couple weeks when I have the time to play him. Lastly, there's only one other legend left to cover if you're keeping track, but I just wanted to say that these videos do take me a long time, so if you guys do like them, I would love it if you could subscribe. If you have any questions, you can always DM me on Twitter or X. I always stream on Twitch any tournaments that I'm taking place in, so I'm usually streaming like twice a week. Usually on Thursday nights and like Saturdays if there's a tournament going on. That may drop a little with most of the tournaments going to be in person as opposed to online now. But I'll also sometimes be streaming out my deck building processes, stuff like that. But if you're excited for Riftbound, I'm going to have a lot more content coming. As always, any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, leave in the comments. I always respond to all the comments. And if you're looking for scrim partners, always, send me a message. I'm always looking for more people to play with and practice games with. And so without further ado, let's get into the last champion or legend we have to cover.